Hi, friends. My name is Sarah Porter, and I am the Executive Director of Victory Programs. And I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon or evening to talk about Victory Programs, our efforts in mobile prevention, in low threshold housing. We're going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in the Mass and Cass area, and really have a conversation about what it takes to what it looks like to help people transition off the street and get ready to prepare for what's coming next in their lives. I was thinking as I was sitting here, this kind of takes me back to the early days of COVID when we were all excited to, join every new virtual happy hour and watch a live stream from the Cincinnati Zoo. It feels a little bit like we're doing that, having a conversation about something with a group of people that are interested in the topic we're talking about. So I appreciate your being here. I want to start by echoing one of the slides that you saw and thank the Museum of Science for not only supporting our work and being interested in the work we're doing and taking over the tech for this event, which is unbelievably helpful. So thank you. For some of you, depending on which invitation you received, it may have included Tammy Simmons-Dixon, who is our Director of Housing. She's not able to be here today, but Tashonna Simmons has stepped in her place, playing the role of Program Director of Low Threshold Housing, which is a role she plays very, very well. So let me take a minute to introduce the people who are going to be part of this panel. If I think about folks I would love to spend an hour with in person, these people are probably on that list. This is a group of incredibly smart, passionate, committed, dedicated individuals who are doing unbelievably good work in their roles. So let me introduce you first to Trey Weeks. Trey is a case manager with our low threshold housing team. She is a housing search and stabilization specialist. Tashonna Simmons, as I mentioned, is a program director of our low threshold housing program. And Rich Baker, he is the program director of our mobile prevention team. You guys want to give a quick wave? It's a little bit weird talking to a group of people where we can't see who we're talking to. So we're just going to pretend that it's the four of us kind of hanging out and talking about what we're doing. So we can start a little bit by talking about how we ended up here, how we ended up at this moment today. When COVID first hit, Victory Programs took the opportunity to relocate our mobile prevention team, which was operating out of a building down near Back Bay, and spends their time walking to different neighborhoods or different areas of the city where individuals who are spending their day at street level are congregating. And we saw a quick spike in the number of people who were located near our administrative office, which is on Massachusetts Avenue in what is now many of us know as Mass and Cass, kind of near the South Bay Shopping Plaza, if you know what that is. And so our mobile prevention team relocated all their efforts, all their equipment, everything they had, and came down and took over our conference room at Mass and Cass. They started doing street work specifically kind of down in this area. Rich, you want to quick talk a little bit about what that looked like, what the life on the streets at the beginning of COVID was like?
Sure. So just as it was for many of you, there was a lot of questions. There was a lot of chaotic feelings of uncertainty. But something that we picked up on really quick was this sense of community that was building in the area. For all of the negative that has kind of really consumed most of the news cycle about the community that was developed here, there was also a lot of really great things. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that the people that were existing and living in this community are really great. And there's some folks that we were really excited to be able to help support. I think that I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture. There was a lot of challenges. Getting here every single day was concerning. If you remember the days pre-vaccination, every step that we do felt like it was one more thing that could potentially put us at risk. But I think something that was really important to all of us was acknowledging that we had a role to play to communicate complicated health information that we were hearing to be able to ensure that the community that we were serving was well taken care of. And what that looked like for us was distribution of Narcan to reverse overdoses, syringe exchange services, safer use, and then also things like masks, the things that all of us were hearing that we needed to do to be able to stay safe from COVID. Our role was a dual role in terms of supporting to ensure that we were taking care of and preventing overdoses and HIV transmission, while also managing COVID. And I think the reality of what took place in the community was a lot of folks congregated here, and a lot of folks were congregating here for access to services, and also access for information, and also access to, again, like that sense of community. So yeah, that's kind of a snapshot of what things were like in early COVID, even though it's challenging to think that far back at this point.
Thanks, Rich. I will say one of the things that was interesting is if you think about someone who is unhoused, and maybe they're spending part of their time in shelters, maybe they're couch surfing, maybe they're spending their day at the Boston Public Library or at a community space. All of that kind of shut down at the time. So people's access to bathrooms, people's access to a sink to wash their hands. There was a little bit of chaos, I think, in the world, but particularly in our world, the human service world, of, well, is the food pantry open? And what, some of the shelters depopulated, and where do I go? And how does that work? And so really starting to see numbers on the street at that time sort of pick up, and that corresponding with some of the what has now been deemed kind of public health emergency piece, in terms of people having access to what they needed to be safe and secure. Around that time, Victory programs started to think about what it would look like to offer people housing directly from street life. We own a building on Warren Street in Boston, where we have done low threshold housing for probably 10, 15 years now. And we thought, couldn't that happen in other places as well? We had conversations with the Department of Public Health, who was very supportive. We talked about the idea of reviving transitional housing as a middle stepping ground for people coming from the street into permanent housing. And what would that look like? And Massachusetts was open, like, let's think about it. Let's talk about it. And let's do it in what we call a harm reduction way. I think a lot of times when we have these conversations, those of us who do this work think these are terms that everyone knows and use them really freely and easily. And I want to kind of pause for 1 second and offer some definitions of these words that we're going to use, as well as that you might be hearing as you read things or follow the news about things that are happening in Mass and Cass. So I'm going to go back to you, Rich, first, and then over to you, Trey and Tashonna. Rich, can you give us kind of a basic definition of what harm reduction is and means?
Sure. So in terms, harm reduction has become more of a buzzword as we've progressed, and it's gained traction nationally. But at its core, the idea is that we are aiming to reduce harms associated with substance use or different types of behaviors. So that's kind of the formal definition of it, is we're reducing harm, and we're coming in without preconditions and expectations of a person when we're meeting with them. Something that I like to refer to when I think about harm reduction, that I learned from a conference a couple of years back, is also acknowledging that harm reduction is a movement, and it's really framed in this concept of it's person-centered, and it's an expression of radical love, which I think is my favorite use of the term of harm reduction, because I think that's an important thing to think about, of what it means to meet someone who is in potentially a really chaotic point in their life, come in without preconditions and judgment, and say, I'm here to support you no matter what. So that's the textbook definition, mixed with a little bit of kind of my interpretation of working through it over the last couple of years.
Awesome, thanks, Rich. I feel like that's a great tee up for you, Trey, too, as someone who does this work every day, interacting with individuals who are at, as Rich says, that really desperate point in their life. And you do so kind of very naturally with that radical love, with a care and compassion. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about when we say low threshold, what does that mean?
So I personally feel like there's so many different definitions you might get when you're asking someone what is low housing. But for me personally, it's just the bottom of the bottom, the forgotten people, the ones that's not in the shelters or engaging in programs and services and things like that. So that demographic is not being counted when we're counting the homeless population. So
I think that's great. And doing what we can to kind of remove those barriers
yeah,
so that those
definitely.
folks who are so disconnected are able to access something.
Yeah, and actually get re-engaged and want to be,
Exactly. Thanks. That's fantastic. Tashonna, can you talk a little bit about, these three levels that we talk about? We talk about shelter, we talk about permanent housing, we talk about transitional housing. What's the difference, or what are they like? Kind of break that down for us.
Okay, yeah, Sarah. Shelter is temporary. There's usually a check-in time and a checkout time. Transitional housing is another temporary housing for homeless individuals and families. It's a good place for them to start to setting them up to move on to permanent housing. Permanent housing is what it is, permanent. It has no limits, no time limits on it. And it's really for our permanent housing is for formerly homeless individuals and families.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you. So a question that is often raised as we talk about harm reduction, as we talk about the work that Victory Programs does, we talk about these different kinds of housing. How does that mix? What does it mean when we talk about substance use in light of low threshold, or when we talk about substance use in a permanent house? Talk a little bit about that. Like what do these models mean in terms of substance use? Trey, can you talk about that for a few minutes?
So clients decide their service and their treatment. That's the big thing. They decide where they are, and we more so meet them where they are. And that's where harm reduction comes in, because we then give them tools and things to make sure that, like Rich said, they are reducing the level of harm that they are doing. So that could literally be using with a friend, deciding to get clean needles. Just, it can be the littlest thing. And I try to applaud even those things, because sometimes it's harder to do more. And if we're meeting people where they are, it's going to give them a support system to want to do more. So.
Tashonna, as someone who runs low threshold programs, both kind of transitional and permanent, what does it mean? What does substance use look like in your programs?
Really, Sarah, when they come in our programs, we're not really focused on their substance use. We're really focused on health, their overall health. So that's just getting them back, connected to their health care, connected to their mental health providers, making sure that they're taking their meds if they're being provided meds for any illnesses that they have. That's really what we focus on at the beginning. If clients want to work on their substance abuse, that's their choice, and we work from there. But if they are not interested, we don't even address it. But we do provide safe ways of using. In transitional housing, we do hourly checks to ensure that they're using safely and that we are like their accountability partner. So if they let us know, and we check on them every 30 minutes. We never push substance use treatment on them. But that's what it looks like in our programs.
So Trey and Tashonna, talk a little bit about how do people react to that? Because it feels counterintuitive. It feels, Rich's word of radical. Are we ignoring the elephant in the room? How do people, when you say, hey, we've got other stuff to talk about, what's their reaction to that?
So to actually be surprised, what I've come to know and see with harm reduction, it allows people the space to decide for themselves. So I've had clients who had no plans on working on substance use or reducing harm or any of those things when we first, started meeting, but through them just getting different things like their birth certificate or their social, or just, re-engaging in their mental health services and different things like that has made them want to do those things. And they've come to me and be like, hey, Trey, I've been thinking about maybe going into a treatment program, maybe a 30-day, maybe just trying it out. And I always tell them hey, maybe we can look at your options and different things like that. And if you've been other places and haven't liked those places, you don't have to go back.
Shauna, what about you? What do you think? What are people's reactions to that? When you
surprised, like Trey says, very surprised. But it really, really helps us build a trusting relationship with our clients. To not even talk about it. If that's not something they don't want to talk about, we don't visit it. We never bring it up. We only go by what the clients want. So, I mean, it's been really helpful with us to build that trust with them because they don't have any trust in relationships at the point when they come to us. So, I mean, what we do and how we do it is changing people.
Amazing. Every
If
time
I
I
could-
hear you guys, go ahead, Rich.
I was just going to mention, I think one more thing that's really, really exciting to see develop is the connection between the work that our mobile prevention team is doing with the low threshold programs of moving our services into this space where we can now provide kind of that additional level of harm reduction material distribution that we were originally doing out on the street with a lot of these folks. Now we can do it in a place where they have a bed, they have a bathroom that they can use where they feel safe. And we can have conversations that can take things a step forward of, hey, you've been injecting, it looks like you have an infection. Have you thought about maybe shifting to a different type of use of substances? I'm not going to tell you to stop using, but have you heard about doing it this way? Have you thought about maybe moving to different veins? It's allowing us to have these more nuanced harm reduction conversations that were harder to do out on the street when you have someone maybe looking over their shoulder for the next threat that potentially is posed to them. We now have that available to us to be able to work with our team in the low threshold programs to kind of build that up. So we're only advancing that further, and it's more exciting each week to see the types of relationships that our team is able to make with the low threshold housing staff as we start to really see what that can look like.
I warned everybody about the mute button, that we were going to have a moment of saying, oh, you're on mute. And I'm the one that it happens to, of course. There's been a lot of talk in Boston about encampments, about the tents. The tents that they've been around a little bit, but they sprung up in a significant number last summer, and then very publicly came down in January. Talk a little bit about those tents. You know, what can you tell people about the tents, about life in the tents, about the tents up and down? They're definitely a hot button issue. Rich, you want to start? You spent a lot of time near the tents, and Trey, you did as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think the tents got a lot of attention and a lot of coverage because it was something that Boston wasn't used to seeing. It was something that kind of cropped up, and people were really shocked by kind of the public spectacle of it all. I think the important thing to realize, and I had mentioned this before, was while the tents posed a really complicated situation in terms of safety, in terms of sanitation, I want to underscore the fact that there was a sense of community in that space, and a community that in many ways protected itself. You had people responding and saving each other from overdoses. You had supervised consumption occurring, again, acknowledging that we aren't coming in to stop substance use. Substance use is going to take place, whether you choose to over police it or try to force people into treatment, it's going to find ways to happen. It was happening very publicly, and I think that was something that got a lot of attention and people weren't focused on or hadn't seen before. But that said, I do think that it offered an opportunity for us to build a lot of really strong relationships with the community and be able to connect in ways that we weren't previously. I'm not going to say that the work was not incredibly challenging. It presented a wide myriad of different challenges on a day-to-day basis. Everything from staff safety to just feeling overwhelmed by the state of what can I do when the level of need is so high. But I also want to acknowledge that there were some really great stuff going on there. And I think that community element is something that is starting to be built in other spaces, like in our low threshold programs. Without some of those acute safety things that are those acute safety concerns that existed before, some of that is removed. I'm not saying, again, nothing is perfect and we shouldn't be striving for perfection, but we've removed some of those risks. And I think it's important to think about what that community is doing now, and now that it's moved to a new space, and work off of that energy to continue people to improving people's lives. And that's what we're all here for.
Trey, you spent a lot of time near and around the encampments as well.
Yeah.
With the task of doing housing work with people,
Yeah.
which a little bit feels like, a ridiculous assignment. Talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
So I guess this is kind of where we put the motto in of meeting people where they are, because I would literally come to my clients' tents. And for like, it was a dangerous situation at times for the clients and things like that. But like Rich said, there was a sense of community there. There was no risk of being barred because of your substance use and things like that. You could use freely and have a place to stay at night, as well as, like, I've seen things where clients, someone does have a situation where they're staying and it's not the best situation, or it's dangerous to them, and now their friend is offering them a place inside their tent. And it might not, to us, that might seem so small and like why would you want to do that? But to them, I'm in a dangerous situation and my friend now needs to be in a better situation, so me giving them somewhere to stay tonight is going to help them out. But for me, working down in the tents with housing, it had its challenges, but I always knew where to find my clients. I always know where to find my clients and where to go. And they often say that I was their stalker. And I would tell them, like, yeah, I'm going to come find you. If we have housing work, I'm going to come find you. And some days it would be, the client would be like, just not today, Trey. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm here Monday through Friday. I'm going to find you another day and we're going to get this application signed. And, I would tell a lot of them, like, because they would become stressed about the fact that, like, why would I want to sign housing applications if I don't have an address to send them to, if I don't have any of those things? And I would always offer things like, well, use my office. You can use my office address. I'll collect your mail. If you don't feel safe with your birth certificate and your social out here, give it to me and I'll give you a copy so you can always, refer to that. And then if you need the physical, you can always come back and we can work from there. So the tents, yes, were dangerous, but they also they gave the clients a sense of security.
So as you're in the tents or around the tents and you're talking to people about housing applications and what it would look like to exit street life, what was people's reaction to that?
A lot of them, I felt like a lot of them had a lot of pushback, because when I initially started working with a lot of clients, they would say the same thing to me. They'd be like, I don't know how long you're going to be out here, but people come out here all the time and they start talking to us and they disappear. And it would be like, okay, after seeing me for a month, after seeing me for 2 months, after seeing me for 3 months, I've had some clients at this point, we're going to reach our year mark of us working together pretty soon. So them constantly seeing me and seeing that I truly do want to help and want to change the current situation that they're in, whichever way they feel they need me to change that situation, they started to open up more. They started to tell me more. They started to be not afraid to be honest about where they were and what they needed, or the services. I would have clients miss meetings and they'd come to me and be like, Trey, it just wasn't a good day for me yesterday. And I'd be like, so, okay, let's take 20 minutes right now and just do something. One of my biggest things I would tell clients is, even if you come see me for 5 minutes, pat yourself on the back because you did something today. You did something and strive to do something more than you did the day before.
It's amazing to hear you talk like that and think about, whatever we titled this roundtable, what it really takes to help people exit street life. It takes that level of work and that level of interaction and that level of acceptance and freedom and encouragement and support. That's kind of half of the equation. It also takes, you're working in an incredibly difficult housing market. These housing applications are for places where they're getting thousands of applications. And, you're trying to convince a landlord to take a person into their house that really is probably not looking like an ideal tenant at that point in time. So kind of fast forward, in September, Victory Program started opening up units for the individuals that Trey and Rich are talking about on the street. So since September, we've opened up 65 spaces. 23 of them are permanent locations and 42 of them are transitional. Very publicly in a hotel that we rented, where people, when the tents came down, they transitioned into this hotel. It's a transitional place in that it's their space, kind of for as long as they need it, or up to a year. That's how long we have the space leased for at this point. But 65 people were able to exit life in the tents or life at the street for now, through the work you've done, Trey, and us kind of creating that second half of the equation of someplace to go. Tashonna runs that hotel, which is almost as hard as doing housing search in the tents. So Tashonna, talk a little bit about what changes for people when they go inside. So instead of staying in tents, which has the community, which has the safety, but also has, there's violence, there's, sanitation issues. It's not like a great place to live, despite some of the good aspects. When people exit that and come inside, what changes?
So I can just tell you from experience of what we experienced at the transitional. Folks came in, it was very difficult for them to sleep in beds. We had a lot of folks still sleeping on floors. We had people pitching their tents in the rooms. It was a really, really difficult transition for them. Staff on a daily basis would have to talk to them about showering, waking folks up to come eat, working with folks on normal bedtimes, because on the street, you just don't have a normal bedtime. A lot of folks are up at night. So we work with them to be, you up in the daytime, being proactive, sleeping at night. We have seen folks come in that were in really bad health, haven't been eaten, haven't had any weight on them, sores that haven't been addressed. And since they've come to the hotel with Rich's team coming in, we provide on-site medical services every Monday through Boston Public Health. I think it's Boston Public Health or Boston or Byron McGinnis, maybe. They come in once a week.
Healthcare for the homeless.
Healthcare for the homeless. Thank you, Sarah. They come in once a week and they provide medical care to the clients that are on site. Rich's team comes in, they provide STD testing, STI testing. And we have seen just people thriving inside. It has been such a change. People are really addressing like any issues they had. People haven't seen their families in years. We have been helping folks reconnect with their families, reconnect with their children. Folks are just, it's amazing. I just wish people could see it, like from the beginning to now, like just to see the change, the willingness, the trust that they're building in the staff. At the beginning, we had so much aggression towards the staff. Clients are no longer aggressive towards us. They trust us. They trust that we're going to be there. They trust that we're going to wake them up for breakfast. They trust that they're going to get the 3 meals a day. They trust that we're going to be there when anything happens, like that we're going to check on them. We're going to say, are you okay today? Or do you need anything? Do you need any support? So the change is amazing, and I wish people could see it firsthand, Sarah.
It's because I have done some time over at Envision, and a lot of my clients are in Envision now, and I do like to stop by and check on them, just to see how they're doing and different things like that. And Tashonna's 100% right. It is a very, very big change from the beginning to now, to the point where I was there recently and a situation had happened where a new client had come in. She had just left out of a situation that was very dangerous for her, and she had come into the hotel, and you could tell she was very timid and very timid but very aggressive. Like she had to protect herself, but it was a front because she had to protect herself. So we had already served lunch, and she was just like a few moments late for lunch. I had literally just walked out of the kitchen back into the office to go grab something, and she had jumped over the counter. And another client seen her doing this, and this client had been there for a while. And the client kind of stopped her and was like, "Hey, you don't have to do that here. Like they're not gonna, starve you, anything like that. If you're hungry, you just let them know, and they'll definitely give you something, even though you missed lunch." So it was just that alone, seeing how the client knew like they were safe and that they could let this other client know, like, it's okay. This is not the same environment that we were dealing with, being in the tents. This is not the same environment we felt like we were dealing with being in the shelters. They're very different, and you can trust in that. So just to see them advocating for us and even protecting us, felt like what we were doing we were on the right path.
Awesome. We have a little video to show of a tour of one of the houses, the permanent locations. But before we do that video, I want to address a couple of the questions that are coming in that relate sort of to what we're talking about in terms of transition. So somebody is asking about, there's definitely pros of transition, but people are coming in to be either in the transitional units or the permanent unit with PTSD, trauma from having lived on the street, in addition to whatever else is going on, whatever medical issues you're talking about, Shauna, or there's substance use issues that, Trey and Rich are talking about, but they've got, a bucket of stuff that's going on for them. So what happens with that? What services or conversations are you all having about, people's experiences, people's mental health needs, and or feeling disconnected? Maybe they're not in the same space with the exact same community they were in downtown. How, exiting street life into something else can be an incredibly difficult challenge, and people could feel isolated and lonely being in their own room as opposed to surrounded by others. What happens with that? Shauna, can you talk a little bit about some of that?
So at the hotel, like I said, we do hourly checks. We have resident advocates on site that will go into a room with a client and stay an hour and have a conversation or check in with them. Like, how are you today? Like, so even I do it. The assistant program director, like we really engage with our clients all day long. They're never alone. Like, yes, we come every hour, but if we send something, we know them so well now. If we send something off, we're there every 30 minutes. Or we'll say, come down to the common area, let's watch TV for a little while. Come down to the common area, let's play cards for a little while. We have an on-site case manager, and she checks in with every individual daily. And then we have also a housing stabilization case manager on site who checks in with people daily. It's not always about housing. It's just about where are you today? And that's kind of how we go about it at the hotel.
It does feel like a community there.
Yes, and we want them to build their own community, and we want to be a part of their community. So this is their community, and we're becoming a part of it.
So that leads to another question that came in. We've talked about community. We've used that word a lot, and honoring the community that existed at Massancas and that is creating in different spaces like the hotel. But the question, I'm going to read it. It's a well-phrased question. How does Victory Programs honor those communities, the communities that existed at Massancas or in these hotels, and be inclusive in involving people with lived experience in the design and delivery of housing programs or services? So basically the idea of how do those with lived experience, or those who are experiencing life on the street or substance use or any of these things that might be described as challenges or complex situations, how are they involved in designing or formulating our services? Rich, you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I know that's a key piece of your work.
Sure. We value lived experience to the nth degree when it comes to our work. I think that's the case. It's kind of cut through the thread of Victory Programs and a lot of our programs, but I think it's something that we've learned over time is something that is really important to attract some of the staff that are going to get the most out of the work, but also the staff that are going to bring the most to the work, is having a connection in one way or another to the folks that we serve. It's something that I think is really powerful to one's experience, to be able to say, this is something that I've gone through in my own life, and I'm looking forward to finding ways that I can help someone else who might be in similar circumstances. It's something that we've prioritized in our hiring in the mobile prevention team over the years that I've been involved with the team. And it's something that I've really seen kind of produce the results that we're looking for. And I think that it's important to say that it's not always, in our work, it's not always results that look pretty on paper. So much of our work can't be boiled down to simplified outcomes. It's something that our work is incredibly relational. It's the first thing I think of when I'm hiring someone. Is honestly, most of something that's on a resume doesn't necessarily matter to me. It's how can I feel comfortable with the way you're going to treat the person on the other end of our services? Do I feel confident that when you go out and I send you out into the community to be the face of our team, how are you going to treat that person? How are you going to treat that person on their best day? And also, how are you going to treat that person when they might be having one of their worst days? And I think that's really important, that really what we need to do is focus on people skills. And that is hiring question number 1. It's actually hiring question number 1 through 10. If we get through that, maybe we can talk content, but for the most part, character really matters. And I've found that folks with lived experience are really able to connect well to their communities and get a lot out of doing this work.
Great. Let's go ahead, Trey.
Now, I was just gonna say that just on that, I think that's how we got most of our clients, is through them going to their friends and saying, like, go to Victory Program, they'll give you services, they will help you. I have clients constantly call or text and tell me, like, hey, I gave my friend your number, I sent them this. And I have clients that come into admin just like, hey, does Trey work here? I need to talk to her. So I'm constantly getting phone calls and texts and things like that. Like, there's a client here that you need to connect with. They're looking for you. There's a client here, and I'm everywhere looking for them. So
Awesome. Let's pause and watch the video so people who are here can see exactly what the permanent housing units for folks who are exiting street life in this Mass and Cass area is looking like.
So here at our program, there are 3 units in our building. Each unit houses 4 individuals, and those individuals share a common space. So the tour that we're going to take you on is that you're going to get to see one of the units that the clients live in and also the common areas that they share. We'll talk a little bit about what happens here in the program and also the services that we provide. So first, we're going to look at the living room area. And so in this space is where individuals are able to have a moment of peace outside of their room. They're able to watch television here. They're able to congregate with their housemates here. They're able to work with the staff that are on site. So our next room that we're going to take a little tour of and visit is the kitchen area. We have a fully equipped kitchen, as you can see. Folks utilize this space just like you or I utilize our kitchens. They prep their meals. They have meals together. You know, the responsibility of this unit really belongs to the clients. So they're in charge of making sure that they keep the place clean and organized and neat. And as you can see, it's pretty much stays this way.
the biggest thing for us is that the clients are now in permanent housing, and we want them to feel as though they are in permanent housing and are responsible. Because when they leave here, you know, Victory is not going to be their tenants elsewhere or their landlords elsewhere. And we want them to gain certain livable tools here to take to their next units. So this is our ADA accessible bathroom for our clients who may have any disabilities and things like that. We do try to house those clients on the first floor just for accessibility and different things like that. We do have a chair in the shower right now for a client who does have ADA issues and has to need extra assistance when cleaning himself and different things like that. We provide what we feel our clients need. So if a client comes to us and states that they're having concerns or issues and needs something, maybe a wheelchair or something of that nature, we will work on getting donations and different things to get the client what they need. So in this portion of the tour, we'll show you a client's bedroom and how they may keep their living space and things like that. Before the clients moved in, we did provide them with a full-size bed, a dresser. We gave them a robe, different linens and things like that, as well as toiletries and things like that, so that when they first moved in, if they didn't have anything, they had something.
This is our outdoor space where our tenants are able to have fresh air breaks, have some private time to themselves. In addition to that, we provide some sitting spaces out here for folks to be able to enjoy their neighborhood.
We also have a couple plans and ideas for the backyard. We're hoping to get some raised beds out here with some seedlings and start planting those with the clients just to give them a little bit of purpose and things like that.
So we would like to thank you for coming on this tour with us. We hope that you have a greater understanding of what low threshold permanent housing looks like. And thank you again.
Those are our permanent units. So we have 2 buildings that are housing 23 people in permanent housing. People are learning to cook meals. They're learning to what it means to be a tenant, what it means to be a neighbor, how to build a community in a different space. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges. it's not easy work. Like, let's not pretend it's easy. It is super hard. You basically need folks like you kind of every step of the way, but talk a little bit about what some of the challenges are. Shauna, you want to start as the program director who handles most of the challenges?
Let's just say the challenges is I think is motivating, keeping my staff motivated, dealing with, you know, any emotional stuff that the staff have going on. Maybe they've had an incident with a client yelling and screaming at them that day, and they're just at their wits' end, and just talking and walking them through that. It's very challenging in that way, or just clients who just want to be difficult. I have one client every morning, he says to me, he comes down, if I don't have muffins, he's, Shauna, where's the effing muffins? And I'm like, you know, I'm sorry, you know, we ran out of muffins. And he's like, you know better, I love muffins. And you know, at first I was like, oh my God, this guy yells at me every day. Like, what is it? And then I just realized, he said to me, I said, Renard, sorry, didn't mean to say the name. I said, what is it? Like, what is it that, you know, makes you so upset with me? And he's like, you know what? I hate rules. I see you as the person who makes the rules. And so every time I see your face, I'm ready to fight the person who makes the rules. And I was like, well, let's try something different. Like, don't think of me as that way. Think of me as a friend, or, you know, somebody who's going to be here every day to make sure you get breakfast. And he's like, okay, just make sure you have my muffins. And he walked away. So, I mean, it's super challenging, but it's also rewarding when you get to that person and they're like, wow, you know, she really cares. Like I just can't, like, it's very rewarding in that way to build those relationships with each individual that's at the program.
That's a perfect setup for another question that came in kind of to each one of you. You know, where do you personally find the strength and encouragement to continue, to not be overwhelmed by the need, either in individuals or the need in terms of the sea of people? Rich, you want to talk a little bit about where you find that? And then Trey, we can hear from you too.
Yeah, I think the honest answer is that there are days where you get overwhelmed, and you just need to be willing to accept that and work through that, because if you pretend like you're not, that's actually the first way to burn out the fastest. I think in terms of kind of gathering the strength, I can speak for myself, and I think for kind of our team dynamic is we come back, we brush things off, we debrief with each other, we acknowledge the experiences, we talk about when things are hard, and it's not a matter of deciding like the one thing that I will say is important, and is something that I've yet to see folks do, is people don't blame the individuals. Oftentimes it's more acknowledging the circumstances, acknowledging what's happening, and then depersonalize it. It's incredibly important to depersonalize when you have that situation where you're having a tough time with a client, is acknowledging it's not about you, it's about something else, it's about the conditions and their experience. That's a helpful tool to keep in your mind. Is we're working with folks who don't have a lot of resources, and they're, in many cases, when we have challenging days, that's an important thing to have in the back of your head. But it's also important to just acknowledge that that was a really, really hard moment, and that was a really hard day. Tomorrow might be hard, but there's going to be a day that's better. And it's critically important to have a team that's got each other's backs. And that's something that I think has been tried and true throughout my experience here. But it became increasingly more important during some of those rougher days when COVID was the complicating factor. Knowing that your team had each other's back to be able to talk through some of that hard stuff is where you get that motivation.
You know, someone told me years and years and years ago that if this work doesn't break your heart a little bit, then you're in the wrong field. And we learn to kind of live with that broken heart and to lean into it, and what that looks like to help, you know, create change, both helping people create their own change, as well as what we need to do at systemic levels to fix a system or multiple systems that have caused some of the problems we're looking at. Trey, talk a little bit about that for you and maybe how you define success or how we define success in these programs where maybe people aren't making big changes. Maybe people are still, using substances to an extreme level. What does that mean for you?
Well, my biggest thing is I meet people where they are, and that is wherever they are. That literally could be someone like I went to the tents. I was sitting at tents with people signing applications and different things. That is as straightforward as I can get. I try to accept the clients for who they are and not who I want them to be. That's a really big thing. You don't want to put your hopes and dreams on them of who they could be, because you could see the potential in them a 1,000 miles, but it's a matter of you don't want to put that level of pressure on them of being who, because I feel like for so long they've dealt with so much pressure of being who people needed them to be, or pretending that they could be who people needed them to be, instead of just being exactly who they are. So I allow my clients the space to be who they are, whenever that is. And I try to take nothing personal. Nothing is personal. You're just having a bad day. Like Rich said, this is not an attack on me. You're just having a bad day and need somebody to point that anger at.
Yeah, definitely. So fast forward, understanding we only have about 10 minutes left here. So is everything fixed? Like, what's happening at Mass and Cass now? Rich, you spend time down there, at least a couple times a week. What's the story down there now?
So I think I mentioned this at the beginning. It's important to acknowledge that one large move like we saw a couple months ago to house people is not going to change years of behavior, and it's not going to change the conditions that bring people back to this community. And that doesn't prove that the model is not working. The model is working because of all the things we've just been talking about for the past hour. All of those relationships that we built with people, the connections that we made. I can't remember who say this. I feel like I hear Sarah say this, that you might be repurposing of the opposite of something is connection.
Yeah. So it's Johann Hari talks, or Gabor Mate, he talks about that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection.
Right. So some degree of that is what I'm trying to get at. And I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of those conditions, the neighborhood is going to continue to experience and look similar to the way that it has in the past. The short of it is that, yes, we are still engaging with folks on a regular basis when we're doing outreach here. And there are days when there are warm weather days, which tend to bring people outside, just as you like to go out in your backyard. Folks like to go out and experience the warm weather that they were experiencing prior to them getting housing. So we are interacting with folks in this area. The reality is we're doing so, and they're accessing services, and I see that as a positive step. They're using the engagement center, they're utilizing our outreach services. And it's going to be a long trajectory. The point of getting someone from stably into a room to getting someone stable enough for housing is a long path. You got to acknowledge the conditions that folks are living within. We have folks who have really complicated mental health conditions. We have a really intense drug market here in Boston. The drugs that we have on the street now don't look anything like they did 10 years ago. They're significantly more potent. Many of them are cross-contaminated with each other. So we have an increase in polysubstance use. So folks who were previously using heroin are now only able to access fentanyl, which is 10 to 100 times stronger than heroin. You have folks that were previously not ever using methamphetamine before, now using methamphetamine, that it has kind of infiltrated the market. So you have a lot of different complicating factors that are going to continue bringing people here. The most important thing is we need to acknowledge that people are engaging and accessing services. The more they engage, the more they connect with their own community, the more they connect with a service provider that accepts them, like Trey has been saying throughout, of who they are and doesn't put our own preconditions on how they can access services, the healthier they will become. And at the end of the day, our goal is to try to create healthier communities, healthier, more connected communities. That may not look like no homelessness and no substance use in the next 2 years, but we're making progress. And I think that's the message, is we are making progress.
Yeah, definitely.
I think
I want to hold on just one sec, Trey. I want to talk about, what comes next or how people can help. Someone asked a very specific question to you, Trey, in terms of what do you need or what would you need to take your work to the next level? Think about that in terms of, where are we going or what can happen next?
The really big thing I really think that we would need more of, truthfully, is funding, because the reality of it is we have to get our clients housed. And the other reality of it is not everybody wants to be our client's landlord. So that's why we have taken up the job of being our client's landlord and putting those hours in. And, as far as getting SROs up and getting transitionals up, because we know what services and things that they need. And I think we are the best people to provide that to them. So definitely more funding to go into our SROs, into our transitionals and things like that, because I feel like for some reason, there's something about Victory that they hold that is so different than other programs. And I go into other programs. I often am in different locations in different places, and I don't see the same charismatic like staff and things like that. So I think this is something that Victory does need to continue, is buying properties or renting properties and giving them to the clients and different things like that, and giving them a space where they feel safe and different, because I feel like I could get my clients housed in a place, but if the property is not understanding of where our client is and who our client is, my client is going to be back on the street within a year. That's the reality of the situation. And I just think that, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something about thinking about people differently. Like my hope is, I work with you all. I talk with you all the time. And we all kind of share some of the same thoughts. And I'm inspired listening to you talk. Like, I love the people we work with more now than I did an hour ago because of the way you talk about them. But seeing people differently, as opposed to thinking of somebody as, I can't even really say the word, but as like a junkie on the street, as opposed to someone who is at the point of, a horrible situation in their lives where multiple things have failed, where multiple systems have not worked for them, where they're making unbelievably difficult choices and dangerous choices just in an attempt to survive. I go back to a story I heard you tell early on about telling someone that they were moving into this housing and starting to cry and say, "Can I call my mom? Can I tell my mom?" These are folks, if we all, those of us, however many of us are on the call still, start to think about people differently, as opposed to, yes, it is definitely a burden on the city or a burden on society, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Can we have a place or a society or systems that work to support even those who are in really challenging places? I do love being in Boston and being in Massachusetts right now, where we're willing to take some chances on creating new models, on opening transitionals, and taking over a hotel that was underutilized, doing everything we can to have as limited of a negative impact on the community around us. Moving 23 people into a basically one block area of a particular neighborhood and having staff there just to keep not only the individuals in the house safe, but to make sure that the community doesn't blow up around us, that we're, helping keep the community safe as well. And in those places is where you start to see people's minds shift. You start to see a little bit of a decline in the idea of, NIMBYism, or, I don't want these people in my neighborhood. That's where you start to slowly see that. A lot of it is slow changes. Go ahead, Trey.
The big thing is that we're changing perspective. We're changing our perspectives. We're changing the client's perspectives. We're changing like you said, the other tenants in the neighborhoods that we're putting our clients in. We're changing their perspectives on things like that. So I think that's the biggest thing we're trying to get done here, is change the perspective of everybody, and as best as possible, help our clients be where they want to be.
Yeah. So we're out of time here, I think, as I peek at my clock. Thanks to all of you. We can't see your faces, those of you who are participating. We appreciate your being here and listening to us to the three of you, Rich, Tashonna, and Trey, thank you so much, not only for being here and being in this conversation, but for the work you're doing. It's really hard work. Lots of us have dreamt of doing this for many, many, many years, and watching it come to fruition is amazing. And with people like you, it's just unbelievable. Thank you again to the Museum of Science for hosting this. I assume we know who's here, and we'll communicate back. If people have other questions, there'll be ways to get in touch with us. If you have specific ways you think you can be helpful or supportive or interested, we'll be sure to be in touch so that we can get that. So again, thank you to all of you. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Reminded me so much of the story that you told about the muffins.
Oh,
Is